What's up, guys? Kevin from California coming at you live from the studio. So, today's video topic is about prophets. Now, prophets of God, people who claimed to be sent from God Himself, people who I believe were meant to be teachers, models, and guides to not only the people they were sent to, but to humanity and the generations to come. Now, I wanted to detail some of my favorite prophets and talk about their stories and the insights and some of the ways that they've impacted my life. Now, one of my favorite prophets is Joseph. Now, for those of you that don't know the story of Prophet Joseph, I'll go over it with you, and I'll break it down a little bit with the knowledge and perspective that I have of the story. So now Joseph was a prophet who was the son of a prophet, and not only was he the son of a prophet, he was the grandson of a prophet. So he was descended from two generations of prophets. Now, Joseph's father, sorry, give me a second. I get them confused. I can look it up real quick, actually. Who was Jacob? Okay. Right. Okay, um, so right. So the lineage goes Abraham, then Jacob, then Joseph. Now, Joseph was born from his father and his mother, but he had to. His father had multiple wives. So he had different stepmothers, and he had multiple brothers from different mothers, half brothers. And once his father made a very beautiful dress for Joseph, like a beautiful garment. And because Joseph's father did this for him, his other brothers got really jealous. Now, envy is a common motif that is shown as a pitfall and weakness throughout all of human history. Starting from the beginning of human history with our brother in creation, um, Satan. He envied man in some narrations, and because of it, that was his downfall, his pride and his arrogance. And so too did the brothers of Joseph also have pride and arrogance and jealousy towards their brother, and so they hatched a plan. First, they were like, we should kill him. And one of the brothers was like, whoa, 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 let's not do all that. Let's maybe just throw him down a well. So, what do? They grab their brother and they throw him down a well. Their own little brother, albeit half brother, but still brother nonetheless. So, poor little Joseph is thrown down a well. Now, just imagine, being Joseph. All you do is, just want to have love for your father and your brothers, but unfortunately, they don't. His brothers didn't have the same love for him, and what was his reward? Just being thrown down a, deep dark well, not knowing whether he would ever escape. And that's when he had to have real trust and faith in God, because how many of us could just be thrown in a ditch or in a well or some place that just seems inescapable, and the only way out is through God himself? But now, Joseph's troubles didn't end here. Joseph had, you know, surely he prayed to the Lord. I mean, anyone in a situation like that is like, you know, even I bet, like, I would argue that even atheists would call out to something, whether it be their higher self or, you know, the universe or a higher power. In times of crisis, there's always something that you seek, that you call upon, that you seek refuge from. And Joseph's break was he got out the well because slave traders were passing through, and they got him out. So now Joseph's like, yay, I'm out. But not quite yet, Joseph. Your story's not finished yet. So these slave traders sell Joseph into slavery. He unfortunately becomes a slave in the land of Egypt. So not only is he in a land that he's unfamiliar with, he's not in contact with any of his family. He was, you know, now made a slave, you know, the lowest of the bottom of the barrel, bottom of the well, if you will. Who got that? Who got that? Who got that? And, you know, in his time as a slave, he's still working hard. And, you know, he's an upright gentleman, as a prophet of God should be, or at least strives to be. Although none of us are perfect, we all make mistakes. Even, you know, I would even go as so far as to say even Jesus wasn't perfect, because not only if you claim, I'll talk about Jesus in another video. You could go like you can talk about Jesus for years on end and still discover something new, just like you can with the Bible or God or anything really. But anyways, let's go back to Joseph. So Joseph, he is working as a slave for this master in Egypt. However, Joseph was a very fine-looking young man. You know, imagine Joseph looking like me, but slightly better looking. Yeah, Joseph was even more handsome than I know it's a little hard to it's hard to believe, but yes, Joseph was quite the good-looking man. However, this did not come without its curse. Joseph's master's wife, so his master had a wife, and that wife was really into Joseph. He was really feeling Joseph. She was like, dang, Joseph, be my little slave. How about you clean my sheets? And she's tried seducing him. And Joseph, you know, ran away from this because he wanted to keep himself pure to God. And he didn't want to also disrespect his master. And eventually, you know, he runs away from her, but she ends up falsely accusing Joseph that he tried coming onto her, when in reality was not the truth. And so he ends up getting thrown into prison. So not only was he thrown into a deep, dark well, he is thrown into deep, dark prison. So he gets thrown into prison, and he's in there, and in there, and in there. Now, Joseph, you know, I like to think of the prophets as having superpowers, you know. You know, like Moses having the power, you know, to be able to split the Red Sea, Jesus having the power to revive the dead, um, and like all these different prophets and all their different powers and whatnot. Now, Joseph's power was to be able to interpret dreams. He was like the dream seer. He's the dream master. And I forgot to mention this, but when Joseph was a little kid, he had a dream that he related to his father. He told his father, he said, "Oh father, I have dreamt a dream. In this dream, there was 12 stars, the sun and the moon, and they prostrated to me." And just like Joseph was a prophet, his father was a prophet, like I mentioned earlier. So his father immediately knew what this meant. And so he tried to take extra care of Joseph because he knew he had a special destiny. Now, this dream is going to come in. Remember this dream. It's going to come into play near the end of our story. It wraps up everything. So, and this is in the beginning of his life that this dream happens. Now, Joseph was now, in prison. He was an innocent man, unfortunately. An innocent man living in an unjust world, as oftentimes is the case in society and around the world, that you have people like Nelson Mandela or other people who are either wrongfully incarcerated or even assassinated. So it is not unlike it's not unlike for good people to end up in bad places. Where you are does not make you who you are. Now, Joseph was still withstanding this with great patience and endurance for God. And he ends up interpreting 2 dreams for his fellow inmates. One prisoner tells him a dream. "I had a dream that it was like a scarecrow and a crow was eating bread on top of my head." And Joseph was like, "All right, you're finna die." He just tells him straight up like, "Oh yeah, that dream means you're gonna get executed." And he was. And the dream came into fruition. It was fulfilled, unfortunately. Just like the good comes with the bad. No matter what is your destiny, good or bad, can't escape it. Then another prisoner had a dream. He said, I forget the dream. I think he was serving wine for the king, but let me look this one up. Prisoners, dream, prophet, Joseph. Yep, pressing wine. So this other prisoner, he was pressing wine. And Joseph interpreted that. He said, "You will soon be released, and you will be serving the king, the Pharaoh." And Joseph thought, well, if this guy's gonna get out and he's gonna be meeting, like, imagine like someone like the president, he thought, mention my name to him, just like I have helped you guys out, help me out. But unfortunately, the prisoner forgot. Oh well. So poor Joseph and his luck, right? First he gets thrown into a well, he gets made a slave, he gets put into prison. Man, how much worse can it get? Are they just gonna kill this guy? I mean, that's where my mind would go. I'd be like, man, at this point, God, are you gonna execute me? Do I have to survive execution? And eventually, Joseph is on one day. Joseph is still in prison, but then one day, the Pharaoh, he has a dream. He says, "I see 7 grains of barley and then they dry up. And then I see 7 skinny cows eaten by 7 fat cows. Something along those lines. I'm not exactly 100% on that. But basically, it's 7. And he had this dream about 7 relating to 7 ears of barley or corn and 7 cows that were one with 7, one with good and bad. You know, the skinny cows, the fat cows, the barley that dries up and the barley that grows. And Joseph, now the Pharaoh, he kept demanding all his wise people and his advisors and his servants about the meaning of this dream, but no one could interpret it. And that's when that one servant that was released, that had the dream about pressing wine and is now serving the Pharaoh, the king, he tells the Pharaoh, I remember when I was in prison, there was a man who had the ability to interpret such dreams. And the Pharaoh said, bring him to me at once. And he is brought. Joseph is brought. And now he's like, whoa. I just went from zero to hero. Here I am in front of the president. And he relates to him the meaning of the dream. He tells the Pharaoh, he says, the meaning of your dream has to do with 7 years of famine and followed by 7 years of abundance. Now, and he also like sells himself. He tells the Pharaoh, you know, I have great ability in measuring justly. And so the Pharaoh ends up taking him on as part of his plan to ration for 7 good years followed by 7 bad years. So in the time that there's surplus, I think I had said it wrong earlier. I think I said famine into abundance, but I meant abundance into famine. Because Joseph says his plan is to take the 7 years of plenty and store up just enough in order to make up for the next 7 years that are going to be terrible, that are going to be like a drought and famine. And so in this time, Joseph is climbing up the ranks. He's working alongside big names. He's no longer a slave. He's made somewhat of a place for himself in Egypt. And now I think about, like, now the Bible, or your favorite source of scripture, doesn't necessarily always describe what the character might be thinking, rather just the events. But now, I want to talk about the psychology of what Joseph might be experiencing, and I want to relate it back to my life and how I find solace and comfort in Joseph's story with my story. And I can always find similarities in every story that I read. It's almost as if God always tells me a story to help me out with my own. Now, I know what it's like to not have your family, but not to the extent that Joseph felt. And I applaud Joseph because not only did he lose his whole family for years, you know, I haven't had my family for maybe months, and I've lost them little by little. It wasn't all at once, like with Joseph. And he was just a boy when he lost them, and I'm an adult. But Joseph really displayed extreme steadfastness and determination towards God because, you know, I just think about like what could have happened or what he could have thought of, you know. Anybody normally could have been like, man, like, my life is terrible. I hate my family. I hate my brothers for what they did to me. I'm gonna rue the day. They're gonna rue the day that they ever did that to me. And, you know, he could have had hatred towards the slave traders, you know, like F them for not even having any compassion towards me, but rather they just saw me as prophet. Get it? They saw me as prophet, but not as a prophet. Anyways, he could have definitely been resentful towards the slave traders, and even more so towards his master's wife for falsely accusing him. But that did not turn Joseph into a character. Rather, all of that was testing him, and he passed with flying colors. That is why God chose him to live the life and to have the gifts that he had. Now, Joseph ends up rising up to number 2 in all of Egypt. So think of him as the vice president at one point. And now, let's take it back to Joseph's family. Now, what has his family been doing all this time? Well, his father has been grieving Joseph. He grieves for his son, so much so that he went blind from how much he would cry. Think about losing your one and only golden child, your you know, your special gift from God. You're the chosen one, the next chosen one to take your place after you're gone. And he lost him. And his brothers, there was 12 of them, 12 brothers. They all must have been feeling different things. Maybe some of them didn't even feel remorse. Maybe that's how evil they were. Maybe some did feel remorse. Maybe some were in between or felt a mixture of them. And it could have been all varying sorts of feelings they could have felt during this time. But now, in that time that there was famine, it affected everyone, and even the family of Joseph and his father. Now, Joseph's father had commanded his sons to go to Egypt to see if they could get any rations from them. Think of it like something like the Red Cross or Oxfam, if you were familiar with those companies that give food to people in need. So, like crisis help and crisis food relief. Now they go to Egypt and they end up going in line, and Joseph recognizes them. He sees, those are my brothers. And so he sees his youngest brother, Benjamin. I believe that's his youngest brother. And he puts like a golden chalice of the pharaoh's or someone of importance, a golden chalice in their sack. And he puts it in Benjamin's sack. And then, as they're getting the food, they get spotted and they say, "Hey, what is this that you're doing with this golden chalice? Are you trying to steal?" And so, the punishment is that that whoever's bag it was found, that's who they take as prisoner. And the brothers were like, "Well, search us. We didn't steal anything." And then they check Benjamin's bag, and there it is, the chalice. Now, the brothers, remembering Joseph, their little brother that they threw down a well, they already lost one brother. And whether it was some, all, or even just one of the brothers, they were not going to lose another one. One brother stepped up and said, "I will take his place. Do not take him as prisoner, but take me instead." That's a true sign of remorse and wanting to make up for your actions, They didn't want to repeat the mistake. At least that brother didn't. If at least just one brother. Because they thought, how could we come back to our father and he just lost another son, his youngest. So then Joseph brings the plan of, come back with your father and your families to this place. So they come back and they return to their father and they say, Father, we must come back, for one of our brothers has been imprisoned. And the only way for them to come back is for them to have any sort of escape from it, is for you to come along with us, is what he demands. And so they come. And now, remember that dream that I mentioned with the 12 stars, the sun and the moon? Well, here it is unfolding. Decades, year after year, decade after decade, it's finally coming to fruition, where it is revealed. Joseph says, it is I, your brother. And as they're all standing in amazement of seeing their long-lost brother, Jacob, Joseph's father's long-lost son, and they all prostrate and ask for forgiveness. The sun and the moon representing Joseph's father and mother, the 12 stars representing Joseph's 12 brothers, they prostrated to him just like the sun, the moon, and the 12 stars prostrated to him in that dream. And they asked for forgiveness for what they had done. And you know what Joseph said? What would you have said in this moment? After all this time, after all that's happened, realistically, what would you have said? Well, you know what Joseph said? He says, worry not, today there is no blame upon you. I have forgiven you. And that just is a mic drop of mic drops. And that is why Joseph is one of my favorite prophets. Thank you so much for staying tuned to this story. If you like that video, don't forget to, like this video, comment, subscribe, and I think I'll make this into a series and continue on with other prophets, but let me know who you guys would like to hear from or any thoughts you had. Until next time, peace be unto you.